Good morning, everyone. Today I'm here to talk about a little bit about Google, not Google Cloud, but just cloud providers in general, and why I think they're not a good option for. Um, they definitely have use cases, but I don't think they're a good option for generally large enterprises, and also they're not a good option for. Um, it used to be a good idea for small developers, but I don't. I think it's kind of leaning away towards that, and the reason is the spending limits or caps, hard caps on your invoice essentially, because you could get surprise bills, and this is something that happens all the time. There's you go and you search up articles about people getting surprise bills from all the major cloud providers, so AWS, Vercel, GCP, Azure. All of them have given surprise bills to people, whether it's enterprises or whether it's individual developers just kind of working on their own hobby sites or kind of their own product. And an alternative to that is VPS, virtual private server. So where you can essentially rent out an EC2. What's equivalent to AWS is like server that you get to provision for a little bit, just get to use that computer, run your services on it, host your app, and then that way you can access it. The only difference between a VPS, or one of the main differences between a VPS and these cloud providers, is that there's generally going to be auto scaling in for the cloud providers. So say for example, if there's an increased demand, there's elasticity. So if there's increased demand on your application, say for example, in an ideal case, your app goes viral or takes off, you have more subscribers and people are going to your application, then it needs to meet the demand. And in order to do that, what it can do is it can scale horizontally or vertically. So it can increase the resources on that server, or it can provision more servers. Either one to be able to meet the demands, but that costs money. That's not free. And because it's not done with reservations, which are generally cheaper, because it's done on demand, or how should I say? What's a good word for it? It's random, right? Stochastic of when that demand might increase, and then you're not really getting the power of good deals, I should say, or affordability, and you get a surcharge. And so a lot of people have experienced that case. So that's the ideal case, and the ideal case is you don't want your site going down, which makes sense because let's say you're starting to get a lot of subscribers. Your site goes down because it can't meet the demands of, let's say, 2,000 or 100,000 users, X amount of users, it doesn't really matter. But because it goes down, now you lost confidence. You don't get those subscribers. Maybe they don't come back to your website, probably won't. And also they lost confidence in it. So that other people who may have potentially subscribed don't want to subscribe or go onto your application because it's gone down, right? Its reliability has gone down, which I think there's maybe less of an argument about that, just because due to AI and hacks happening and reliability going down, for example, AWS going down, GitHub going down, all these major providers going down just because of their use of AI and also exploits. Enough about that. But in the worst cases, you don't want your app going down because then you lose customers, you lose money overall. But the idea of why you don't want it going down is because the hope is that the profits that you would generate from having those, being able to meet that demand, would cover the extra expenses from being able to supply or that provisioning of resources. So essentially, you're getting more than you're losing. That makes sense. That's not necessarily always true. There can be cases where you have increased demand, and as a result, you have to scale your resources, or it automatically scales your resources in any of these providers, but you're not really getting any additional profits. So what are some examples of that? One example is going to be you get DDoSed. So either distributed denial of services. So what happens is you can get some hacker group. They enlist like a botnet or several thousand IPs, and what they do is they either set up accounts or some way access your resources. So let's say, for example, you have some kind of API or some kind of website, and they attempt logins and use your services, and essentially that overwhelms the server. If it's on a system that doesn't auto scale, then it would crash, right? It would be denial of service where other users wouldn't actually be able to use it because it's already overloaded. But because of the elasticity of cloud providers, it would auto scale, so it would increase its resources. Other users could still use it, but the people who are attacking your systems, all they're doing is they're inflating the costs while you're not benefiting any profits, because those aren't people who are looking to pay for your services. They're not looking to help your company. They're just attacking your website. And then this can be done with people who are looking to perform isolated targets against a particular person or company. It could also be cases where you have script kiddies. They're just maybe automated attacks. They're trying to find vulnerabilities and trying to attack it. Because I'm not too familiar with how much these attacks would cost to, let's say, to pay someone to actually do these costs. But I'm certain that it's the payments to perform these costs are probably a lot less than it costs to essentially pay for the auto scaling, the surprise bill that you're going to get, which leads me to my actual point. So if you're here, thank you so much for sticking around. My actual point is you get a surprise bill. And that surprise bill can be anywhere from hundreds of dollars to easily thousands of dollars, especially on the large providers like AWS, Azure, GCP. They tend to have really high prices relative to other providers. I can think of, say for example, I know that Vercel is generally a lot less expensive. So if you go over your fees, Vercel will be a lot less expensive than, say, for example, AWS. And these are just some examples. The reason being is that they charge differently for their services, like ingress, egress, so the amount of traffic and so forth. But the large cloud providers will respond just as effectively to those requests, but it'll cost you a lot more. And so that's why they're kind of dangerous. And there's no real way to kind of stop it. So let's say if you don't want that $100 or hundreds of dollars of surprise bill, thousands of dollars of surprise bill, you would think there would be a way to say, okay, if I'm under attack and I know I only have this much for a budget, there should be a hard cap so that if I reach this much for the month, for the day, X amount budget, then it should stop my resources. And that seems like a particularly useful feature. Of all the big cloud providers, and there's more than what I'm going to show you, but the only one that I can see that has that is Vercel. So you can see AWS right here doesn't have a kill switch effectively, so that hard cap that I talked about. Let's say you run out of budget, so you have $100. Let's say you want to spend for that month. Once you reach your threshold, there is a way to set up notifications, budgets. There is a way also to set up AWS Lambda so that you could essentially kill your services or deprovision your resources. But it's not guaranteed. And I couldn't find the article itself. I remember there was like a help article or guide on AWS on how to do it. But one of the things that it mentioned was you can set up these alerts, you can perform the automation, so implement automated shutdowns. The only problem is that it's not guaranteed. So one of the things is that the notifications may come several hours late, maybe even up to a day late. More likely several hours, but worst case a day. I believe that's what the article had mentioned. I'll try to find it. But that surprise bill, if you're getting attacked and your resources are constantly getting spammed, in a day you can easily get hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars of fees. And the response generally from large cloud providers can be either one of two. They can say, oh, this is your first time getting hacked. Okay, maybe you didn't have these controls in place. And they might be lenient on you and wave it away. They might be, so there definitely has been cases of that. But that's not always the case. The second case is, well, you should have set up better firewall protections. You should have used these services to protect yourself and so forth. And you could have done that. It's just that it's very difficult imagine you're setting up a hobby project. You can set up some configurations to help you, but it doesn't mean you've locked necessarily everything down. There's still ways for hackers to be able to provision multiple IPs so that even if you rate limit requests to, let's say, 3 requests per minute, and you have thousands upon thousands of people attacking your website. Well, let's say even 1,000. So that's 3,000 per minute, right? That's a lot of requests going. You can still rack up a huge bill, and this is for people who are just trying to build hobby projects. Same thing with large enterprises. You're going to feel it more if you're a smaller developer and you're paying it by yourself, and you're ideally wanting to spend nowhere more than, like, let's say $50, $100 a month. But suddenly you're paying over $1,000 in this surprise bill. I think that's where it hits most. But there's even instances of large companies as well, expecting like a few $1,000s in services a month to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands in that month due to these attacks, or what I'll get next to, another vector for surprise bills. But anyways, like I said, AWS, you can see here, you can get it late, and even if you set all of this up, it doesn't mean you're going to fully stop those charges. Here's an article right here from AWS talking about, this is from last year, saying we don't offer this spending limit or hard cap. These are some ways that you can do that and protect yourself with IAM policies, identity access and management policies. Once again, just up your configurations to secure everything, but things get through the cracks, and you can see that with large companies getting hacked still. So it's not foolproof. There's always vulnerabilities out there. The next one is Azure. You can see Azure here as well. They don't have an automated way to stop these configurations. There's no hard stop. It doesn't natively support hard stop. You can try it, but once again, it's not guaranteed to be in the moment. So you can still go several hundreds of dollars over if you're getting attacked. And once again, for Google Cloud, no native hard cap. The only one that really impressed me was Vercel. Vercel, it did impress me that you can have hard stops. So that's really good. The only thing is that's a bonus. So I like that just because they have it. But I decided not to go with Vercel for other reasons. Mainly because, let's say in my case for let's say an application or a website that I build, it doesn't matter to me if the services go down. I'd rather not get charged excessively than have, I'd rather not get charged excessively. So the hard cap works in this case. So that's why I want the hard cap. I don't care if my services go down. In this case, if you reach your limit, you can even set up a static site instead of a dynamic site. So that way it's much lower cost, and that'll save you money. But let's assume we have the hard cap in both VPS. One company that I really like is Hetzner, but let's say if I had to choose between Hetzner or Vercel, why would I choose Hetzner? Well, with the VPS, you're paying for the server, and it tends to be just a lot cheaper, just a lot cheaper. While this Vercel can have auto scaling, so you can make it, even though you have the hard cap. I don't necessarily need the hard scaling on a small application that's going to have hundreds to thousands of users. It's very unlikely that most small apps are going to scale that much. And if they do need to scale, I'll just go ahead and migrate my environment over. I don't want to be vendor locked anyway. And that's another thing about Vercel. They tend to set up services so that you can it's easier to get vendor locked in. Whereas with the VPS, if you have your own Docker containers, is much more trivial to make the transfer. But anyways, or migration. But going back to the VPS. So with the VPS, the amount of egress, the amount of actual, let's say, computation that you get in the month, it can cost you, for Hetzner, it's about $5. You get your dedicated IP address. You get a good amount of resources to be able to work with hundreds to thousands of users, and it's everything you need. If you do get attacked, the site will your server will eventually go down, and that's the hard cap in and of itself. And as long as you're monitoring your server, the amount of ingress or egress, the amount of traffic that can get out of your server, so the egress, that is very limited, just because computationally it's limited. So you only get so many CPU cores, so much RAM, and network bandwidth, that you can't even rack up that many charges. Even if, let's say, your server got hacked and they were just trying to send just payloads out of your server, it's very difficult to get charged a lot of money. I forget if it was like 1 terabyte of egress is about $1. I'd have to look it up, but it's very, very generous on Hetzner. I'm not sponsored by Hetzner. There's a lot of other VPS services like Hostinger and other services. I just really liked how Hetzner, from what I've seen, it looks pretty reliable. Looks like the comparisons between different environments, it seems to be pretty powerful, and it's low cost. So the amount of, how should I say, the amount of services or services that you would get, the equivalent in Vercel, would be much more expensive. That being said, Vercel tends to be more plug-in friendly. So what was the term again? Plug and play. So it tends to be more plug and play. So Vercel makes it a little bit easier. On VPS, you have to manage your own system. So take care of your configurations, security. You also have to, ideally, if you want something like a Vercel environment, you would have to set up like Coolify or Docploy, some other applications to help make it similar to that. So there's a little bit more work up front. The thing that I like about that is there's more learning going involved, and then the risks are much lower. Like I said, you can get hacked, but the costs are lower. And then if you're performing best practices, so you're making sure you have backups, then you can, even if you do get hacked, ideally you don't, you can still kind of get yourself back up online in a different environment and kind of mitigate some of those consequences. So this is all to say, surprise bills can happen with these, and are common enough that they do happen with these large cloud providers. If you do need auto scaling, I would recommend a company that does have hard cap limits built in. One example is Vercel. Let me know if you can find other companies that do this. In my research, I could just find this one, but I didn't spend too long. I spent like about an hour kind of looking into it. And the other reason, actually, kind of want to backtrack just really quickly. One way is if you're getting attacked. I mentioned that you can overuse resources, but I didn't mention the second way, where you can accidentally request or make an excessive amount of requests and have to accidentally provision lots of resources. And the second way is really, I don't want to say incompetence, but I want to say, because accidents happen. And what I mean by that is maybe you write queries that, or maybe you write logic that's incorrect, and it just has very poor performance, and it's costing a lot of resources, a lot of compute. That can be another way that you're really increasing your cost. So let's say this is especially more common with big data. When you're working with big data, it's very easy for you to write queries that are less performant, and as such they require multitudes of compute more than if you had written it in a different way, or maybe if you forgot an index, or right. So you're not doing it optimally, and as a result you're getting hundreds or thousands to tens of thousands of dollars charged more because of that. It could also be as maybe logic that's written in a programming language that's not as performant. So for example, you're writing your logic in Python relative to a compiled language. That's where you could see just a lot of increased compute resources, just because it doesn't have those compiler optimizations. Right, it's going to be interpreted, and so it's a lot slower. That's not to say Python is bad, but it's just to say that there are some real world decisions that get made that can cost you in terms of performance, And if you own your own servers, or if you're hosting on a VPS, then all you get is that slowdown, right? So it's not great in terms of delivering these services to your consumers, but it's not going to cost you more, right? Because you already have X amount of monthly cost on the VPS, or X amount of cost that you've already paid up front for your own on-prem infrastructure. But if you're in a cloud environment, especially one of these big providers, you can have a huge bill, and you can pay for that. And also the reason I say it's not necessarily incompetence, but accidents can happen too, is because you can accidentally forget to deprovision some of your resources. Let's say you were renting out some resource intensive, some high resource or high end machines. Let's say you had provisioned them, but you forgot to turn them off, right? You forgot to remove those resources. Then you're going to still be charged for it, and it's an hourly rate, and you continue to accrue those costs, and you may not be aware until the end of the month. I've seen that happen. It can be costly, and so rather than put yourself in these positions, maybe big companies can take the hit. That's fine, but for small-time developers or people who are trying to do individual projects, maybe consider the risk of placing yourself in an environment that doesn't have these hard cap limits. See if you're willing to take that risk, just because maybe some events can happen that are almost out of your control. Maybe a script kiddie decides to attack your site, or maybe there's some vulnerability that's within a package. Right now there's a lot of supply chain attacks that are happening, but let's say some vulnerability that's in the software that you use gets hacked, and now suddenly, once again, you end up with a surprise bill because let's say you started storing a lot of objects, and you started provisioning a lot of machines, and maybe using it to mine Bitcoin and stuff like that. So who knows how an attacker would use your environment. Or maybe, let's say you're not writing things optimally, you're trying to play with things, and you accidentally write something that's sloppy, and unfortunately you're going to get charged for that. You forget to deprovision something, you get charged for that. So maybe in that case you might consider Vercel, and then, or alternatively, you could consider a VPS. If you're a little bit newer to development, then I would say, these plug and play SaaS companies or PaaS companies, platform as a service companies, are going to be useful, very useful, so that you can get up and running faster. So, there are some good comments I have over Vercel, some bad comments, but I would say in terms of plug and play, that's good. But if it's cost driven, then I also see no reason why people wouldn't go with necessarily a VPS and scale as needed from there. So this is the reason why I think going onto the cloud is not a financially prudent decision. I think if you have extra capital and you're not necessarily worried about surprise bills, then there's no issue there. And so kind of being able to use it on a company's account, there's not a risk to you in a sense. So you can play around with some of these services, and you could, if there's a bill that goes to your company and your company doesn't mind if maybe occasionally there's going to be surprise bills, that works. I mean, they're understanding of the risks and they're willing to do that. If you as an individual developer are also okay with that, then that works. If you're not okay with that, then take my words into consideration. And then, I think that's all I have to say on the matter. I like to speak extemporaneously, so I think about these topics and then just comment on them, my actual thoughts. I do think there's a potential discussion about whether it's better for me to be researched beforehand and have prepared notes to be able to discuss on these topics, just so I can reference citations and be able to kind of explore more points about why it either supports or refutes what I'm thinking. But I do like the extemporaneous this kind of format, just because one, you get to see my thoughts as they are. It doesn't feel. I hope it doesn't feel like it's scripted, because it's not. um, and yeah, it just, it's authentic. It's not a kind of, it's not slop. For me, I don't like AI slop. When you watch videos on YouTube and it just feels very unnatural, I would say, inauthentic. So one, I like it because it's like that, and number two is that yeah, as I said, you get to see my viewpoints. Yes, it's maybe not as well articulated as I would hope, but I get to kind of put my viewpoint out there, and then I'm also open to receiving any responses that would refute my viewpoint, or kind of say, here's another perspective, and I'm open to that discussion. So I like that kind of engagement. Yeah, and then the third part is it's time saving. So if I make this video, I already think about the topic, I'm going to go ahead and record it. Actually, I just told my wife we're going to go to Disneyland a little bit later. But I told my wife, actually, I just want to record this video really quickly. I was thinking of something, and yeah, it's really quick. No editing or anything. The only editing is if I accidentally show any of my personal identifiable information. That's where I'll go ahead and edit it. But thankfully, that's why I tend to have tabs open already beforehand, and I try to limit what I show. But enough about this discussion. If you stick around, very surprised and impressed, only for this last portion because I kind of went on a tangent. But I want to thank you for watching. Let me know if you learned anything, and I'm looking forward to reading the comments.